Good evening, members, and welcome to Audit and Governance Committee meeting this evening, 26th November 2025. Unfortunately, Councillor Nick Harvey, Chair of the Committee, is unable to be with us this evening, and so, members, I'm going to ask you to please move, second and vote on a motion to appoint one of you to be Chair this evening. Please, may I have any nominations? Councillor Bredding.
I nominate Alan Edwards.
Thank you. Any seconders? Councillor Deering?
I second that.
Thank you, Councillor Deering.
Sorry, thank you.
Members, is that agreed?
Agreed, yeah.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edwards, if you'd like to come and join me, thank you.
Okay, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. This meeting is being live streamed as always. In the event of any technical difficulties, the meeting will be recorded and then uploaded as soon as possible and will be available tomorrow for viewing. Members, we've received apologies from Councillors Harbinson, Harvey, Humpman and Wimbledon. Are there any other apologies? None. Okay, thank you. Our agenda item 2 is declarations of interest. Members, are there any interests for items on the agenda tonight that you need to declare? None. Okay. Thank you very much. Brings us to item 3, the minutes for the past meeting. Are the minutes for the meeting held on the 24th of September 2025 agreed? Thank you very much. I will sign those then. Thank you. Members, before we proceed with the agenda, I'd like to propose a motion to just adjust the order that we run in slightly, and that is I propose that we move item 9 to before the current item 5. So because items 5, 6 and 9 are all closely linked, and it'd be helpful to bring that item number 9 forward. So do I have a seconder for the proposal to move the agenda to take item 9 after item 4?
Seconded.
Thank you. Members, is that agreed? Fine, thank you. That was the drama for the evening. Okay, agenda item 4, internal audit, our quarterly progress report. I've just done that. Just done that wrong, having moved the motion, haven't I? Oh, no, okay, thank you. Sorry, confusing myself. So, sorry, Mr. Barnes, would you please introduce that report?
Thank you, Chair, I will. So, going back to the March meeting, the committee approved our audit plan of the work we'll undertake to contribute to the assurances the committee receive about the effectiveness of the council's arrangements that will help you to provide assurance about the annual governance statement that will be drafted in respect of the 25-26 year when we get to spring next year. So this item is our regular report to the committee outlining the progress in delivery of that plan. Appendix 1 provides a status update on each of the pieces of work in the plan, but we do keep the plan under review to address any resource demands the council makes of the audit team to address challenges posed by local government reorganisation, which is coming at us, as that progresses, and any other issues that arise through the year. As we've set out at section 5, our previously disappointing level of sickness absence has much improved, and with the changes to the staffing of the team, there's been a much reduced level of sickness absence so far in 25-26. The audit work is progressing, and at this stage we've got about half of the planned audits underway or completed, and I'm working with the audit manager, the auditors and our contractors to get those completed. The other half of the plan are still at an early stage in the process, with resources arranged, as is outlined at Appendix 1, and in place and ready to deliver the work in time to inform my Head of Internal Audit opinion in the annual report, which will come to you in July meeting next year. It would be nice to have more fully finalised more of the work at this stage, and we are a bit further behind than I would like to be at this point in the year, but we do continue to work towards delivery of that annual report in July next year. As I previously discussed with the committee, we continue to find it's tough to find suitable staff for the team, and as a result, there have been no further changes to the staffing since the last meeting. We have completed 3 audits since we last met in September: the planning applications and development management audit, the environmental health audit, both received satisfactory assurance, and the summaries arising from those reports are shown at Appendix 2 for you, and the cybersecurity incident management follow-up report, also showing good progress with delivery, is shown at Appendix 3 for you. Further fully completed work will be reported to the next and subsequent meetings of the committee. That's all I really wanted to say, Chair, but happy to try to answer any questions the members may have.
Thank you for that. Members, do you have any questions arising from that report? Councillor Bredding.
Yes, first of all, we're approximately 7 months into the audit plan. Progress does at least seem to be not very fast, or less than we may have expected. Only 1 audit has been completed, although a number are underway. Can we explain why there's only 1 completed, please?
So we're not really 7 months into the plan so far. The cycle really goes from July to July when the annual report comes to you. So we're probably we're just under halfway through the year in reality. So that's the kind of scheduling that we're working to. So as I said, we are slightly behind where we'd like to be, but we're not crazily behind at the moment.
Councillors, any other questions? Mrs Mills.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just a couple of points from me, if that's okay. My first comment is probably more in relation to the report templates, and probably relates to all reports that are on the agenda. We get given the risks that are detailed into the covering reports, but we're not told about the scoring of the risk or the mitigating actions to manage those risks. So at the moment, I think there's 4 or 5 risks listed on this report that could materialise, but I don't get a feel for, do I need to be worried as a member about those risks? So I wondered if there was, and it's probably something that maybe Democratic Services might want to take away and look at the format as to whether or not we should be putting some kind of commentary as to what the score of the risk is and how that's being managed, so that we're not concerned. That was just one comment that maybe Democratic Services could take away.
Can I just come back on that? I'm not answering on behalf of the officers on this one, but just the reason for the moving the risk register up the agenda was to address exactly that sort of question, so that we're then looking at future actions down the report. But if you've got anything to add on that. But we'll take that as a note.
Yes, please, Chair. Thank you. I mean, Andrew has answered one of my questions regarding the progress of the plan, so that's fine. I just had a couple of points on the cybersecurity review, if I may. On recommendation 5, I was just wondering whether or not the follow-up actually confirmed whether the supplier was now reporting instances consistently in line with the SLA, because I think it reads that there's a bit more work to be done there. On recommendation 7, I just wondered what percentage of staff had completed the training, because whilst having training in place and staff completing it is sort of gives us a bit more of assurance if we've got a large proportion of staff that have completed it. And lastly, I just wanted to assure that the security incident report response plan has now been approved, because again,
the wording was just a slightly slightly confusing there, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Vance? Okay.
Thank you. Yes. So in terms of the reporting from the supplier, so we do now have that in place. So they're providing us with monthly reports in terms of any cyber incidents that they're basically detecting. For the completion rates on the training, I'll have to go and check with HR on that, because I think they were keeping a record of that. So to just be able to confirm, so I'm happy to take that away as an action and get back to committee on that. And then the final point was around the cybersecurity incident response plan. So that was formally adopted and approved by SLT, by the senior leadership team in July, and we have since undertaken an exercise basically testing that cybersecurity incident response plan since it has been adopted as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Bredding?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions on your report. On Appendix 1, page 5, it talks about the complaints which have been brought forward previously. The minutes actually state that it's anticipated the audit would be completed in November. Could we confirm that the audit has been completed, please?
No, I'm afraid I can't confirm that's been completed. It's still a work in progress, but we are now at report drafting phase.
Okay, thank you. And moving on to managing the business, implementing the action plans. Do we know when it's anticipated to carry out a further audit on procurement and contract management, as these both have a high risk rating?
So, funnily enough, I had an email from the person that's delivering the procurement audit yesterday. So we're about to engage with the business to set up those follow-up reviews of the work that was previously done. So those both are follow-ups of previous work, and they're about to kick off.
Lovely, thank you very much. And I've got one other question, if I may.
Carry on.
The fire safety, housing, health and safety compliance are both listed as work in progress. Going forward, could we have an indication of where we are and when it's anticipated the action plans will be fully implemented, please?
So that work is currently underway. As it says, the feedback I've got so far actually is very positive, which is good news. So I'm hoping we'll be able to bring that report, the report for both those items, to the January committee. I won't commit to that because I might end up not achieving what I've just said that I'm going to achieve. But that's well underhand and pretty close to completion.
Can I just follow up there? I think the request was on the report. Can we have an indication of status that indicates a bit more than work in progress? Was that a correct summary?
Yeah, I'll have to, it might be worth liaising outside of the meeting in terms of what kind of classifications you're looking for, because work in progress does cover quite a wide range of potential statuses, but equally it's getting the balance right in terms of how much detail you need and how much detail we can go into along the way.
Thank you. Councillor Dearson.
Even Andrew, yeah. Just a general question, really. So when you do an audit, then there's a number of action items. When you're following up on those action items, is it because they haven't been completed within the timelines that are provided by the business? And if the timelines provided by the business are not yet there, then why would you bother to follow up? It's just because normally you would think that they would say it's going to be done by December 31st, so you'd only look at it then, or maybe on closer to that date. So I'm just trying to understand if that's creating more work for you because the officers are not delivering the other way around.
Yeah, so the process is that if an audit receives partial or minimal assurance, then we will schedule a follow-up audit, which will happen subsequent to the last date of an agreed action. So we discuss with management and agree the actions and agree when they'll take place or be completed by, and then we'll schedule a follow-up visit beyond that date so that management have committed to delivering all those implementing those recommendations by a particular date. After that, we'll then come in and check have they done so or not. An example is the cybersecurity one in the Appendix 3, where we've gone beyond the date of implementation and we've then come in to check. And as Ben just said, and the report says, most of those recommendations have been implemented as was agreed. There's still some tweaks to do on 3 of them, but that's the process. We wouldn't come in before the last date. Otherwise, as you say, there's no point really asking management about how they've done stuff before they're due to do it. It would not make sense.
Nothing that you think that's yet to be achieved that's missing a deadline that you've got any concerns over?
So that there's a regular cycle of management reporting on how they're getting on, which is the next item on the agenda. And I get involved in looking at that and preparing the report for you. So in terms of that, then there's not anything that's majorly concerning. There is some stuff which is taking longer than you'd hope, but there are usually reasons for that, and obviously there's lots going on around the organisation. So it's about getting the balance right between the risks that are out there and how they're being tackled and the resources that are available to deal with that.
Members, are there any other questions for this section? Well, while you look at your notes, I do have a question that I'd like to just follow up on. With 3 of our, I think it's 3 of our peer councils today under significant pressure due to cyber attacks. Just coming back to the exercise that was run, were people from all levels of the organisation involved in that? Because obviously the front line's where a lot of the risk is, and we need to make sure the whole organisation is exercised to know their roles and how they report.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the exercise that we undertook involved people from a range of levels of the organisation, from one of the directors through to let's say a sort of communications officer level. So we did have all the people around the table that we felt we needed to have there. We also had the involvement of the council's IT contractor as well, who actually helped to facilitate and run the exercise for us. So it was done through the Emergency Planning and Business Continuity Board, which itself has a range of different levels of officers on it. So I think I'm happy that that we had the right people there for that particular exercise. Thank you.
That's reassuring. Thank you. Ms. Mills.
Thank you, Chair. That's actually prompted a question in my mind. Given the sort of the press about what happened yesterday with a number of local authorities, have we taken any steps to use that as a reminder to staff that whatever we do, don't click on anything? And members as well, not just staff, but members as well.
We haven't taken that specific incident, although it's obviously been raised to our attention, and we're keeping an eye out on any NCSC bulletins or any information around that. We do routinely send out reminders to staff around not clicking on stuff, and that's very much the sort of the basis of the training that was sent out. But again, I think it's a helpful suggestion actually, whilst it's topical, to just send out a reminder to staff just to take care, because it's usually the route in to systems. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mills. If it assists you further, I think just last week or maybe the week before, myself, Carrie and the Section 151 officer were subject to a phishing attempt, which we spotted and referred to our internal people who did the usual scans, identified that it was in fact a phishing attempt, and then communications were cascaded across the organisation to make them aware that that was a phony email address. So we are living it.
Thank you. Councillor Dearson.
Sorry, this might be a stupid question. Normally I ask the stupid ones, and it's just like Paula, I just had a thought while I was sitting here. With cyber attacks, etc., do we have any concerns with people working from home being more vulnerable, or the fact that they're using their own internet, blah, 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 at home and all this sort of stuff? I know they've probably got the, little discs with and stuff on there, but I just wonder, are we concerned about the working from home process in instances like this?
think we're concerned about cybersecurity sort of full stop. I mean, for people working from home, that they are required to log in as we have to in the council offices using a sort of multi-factor authentication. So we have fingerprint readers which we use to log onto the systems. People also access the council systems through a VPN, basically. So yeah, that there is that security around it. So when they are logging on, there is that security element to it. So even though they're using their own internet, when they're looking at the council systems, they are doing that through our own VPN here. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Bredding.
Thank you. I have one further question on Appendix 2 on the audit paper. Page 14, the last paragraph. Finding my question for a minute. Right. Are there any plans in place to consider adopting a proactive rather than the reactive approach towards monitoring planning conditions? Because that actually says that limited resources, we have a reactive rather than a proactive approach to monitoring planning conditions, and I find that statement a little bit concerning.
Well, that was the conversation that we had with the team, but it's a question of resources and the number of people that they've got and the capacity to sort of get around the organisation. So I would expect them to do it on a kind of a risk assessed basis. So if a condition's really important, then they should be going out and checking that. But there'll be other conditions where they just haven't got the resources to be able to get through them all. Absolutely.
Angela, I think you want to come in on that one.
Yes, thank you. So Councillor Bredding, the sheer volume of planning applications that we receive that have planning conditions could be is quite significant. Some of them are relatively minor, and as has been alluded to, some of them are potentially more significant. To police that is outside of our statutory responsibilities, and would have a disproportionate effect in resource terms, and we wouldn't be able to recover that. And also, I think we have to work on the basis of an element of trust, where there is a report made to us. It's dealt with through the enforcement policy, and we have resourcing staff for significant enforcement action. So, for example, where we know that there is going to be a very significant breach that we need to manage, then we will resource accordingly. But otherwise, we would be quite literally looking at through people's windows to see whether they'd put their fence at the right height, and I don't think that would be a good use of our time.
Thank you. Councillor Dearson.
I think the only thing I would like to add to that, and just to support that, is I have currently about 6 or 7 incidents of enforcement just in my ward alone, and Laura has been fantastic, but she's just been pulled from pillar to post, and if she looks at mine in my ward, there's similar in other wards, from fences, the building, knocking stuff down and rebuilding, and etc. And I think in a very difficult situation, I think they do a marvellous job, to be honest. But it is, at the moment, impossible with the resources we've got. That would be my only comment to support you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dearson.
Members, are there any other questions arising from this report? Okay, thank you. Thanks for the report, Mr. Barnes. Can we note that as the report received?
Noted.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're now moving on to what's labelled as agenda item 9, the corporate risk register. Mr. Brooke, could you please introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the second time that the corporate risk register has been brought to committee, and it will continue to be brought to committee on a quarterly basis. There is something on the recommendations within this report, just flagging to Audit and Governance Committee that if there are any areas of concern on the corporate risk register that they feel would need an escalation or perhaps a referral to Cabinet, that I think we're suggesting that would be a good route to do that, rather than replicating the report in its entirety to Cabinet, because essentially it would be the same business going to 2 different committees. The actual report itself, within the covering report, just give some details around the corporate risk register being a key management tool for identifying and managing risks that could impact on the delivery of the council's priorities. As a reminder, we score the risks using a 4x4 matrix, and that ends up with scores basically ranging from a 1 all the way through to 16. The corporate risk register itself is maintained and monitored through a performance and risk IT system, which is a relatively new development, and indeed it's that system that's used to generate the report that you see in front of you, particularly Appendix 1 to the report where all the detail is contained. The register itself is reviewed at quarterly business review meetings, and then also by the senior leadership team. And in terms of accountability, we have, in most cases, there are some exceptions, but senior leadership team members who are the owners of the risk, and then the assistant directors typically are responsible for implementing the mitigating actions. So there is a list in paragraph 5.3, which is all of the risks which are currently on the corporate risk register. There are 21 of them. We have 3 risks which are appearing in the high risk category, so that's a score of between 12 to 16. One of those relates to cybersecurity, and I think we've already had a conversation this evening around that. And the reason why the score is left as a 12 is just because of the continued ongoing threat from this, and in particular to actually recent events affecting a number of London councils. We have a fire safety risk on the corporate risk register, which retains a score of 16, and it will stay there until the remedial works are carried out. And then finally, the housing revenue account, which retains a score of 12, and the stock condition survey, which is one of the mitigating actions there, will inform future works required across the housing stock, at which stage we'll have a much better understanding of the pressure on the housing revenue account. So I don't want to go into all the detail of Appendix 1 because there is a lot of detail in there. It is the corporate risk register replicated in its entirety, so it's not a summary version, but I'm happy to take any questions about any of the risks, although because of the breadth of them I can't guarantee I'll give an answer, so I may need to take away your questions and consult with colleagues before bringing them back to the committee. Thank you.
Ms Mills.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Ben, for the report. As always, very helpful. And I think I have said previously that your risk register itself is very, very detailed and gives an awful lot of information, which is very handy in one way, but also an awful lot to get through and the opportunity to raise lots of questions. And I think we need to be careful as the Audit Committee to make sure that we're focusing on getting the assurance around the risk management process rather than delving into the much detail of individual risks, because I don't think that's really the role of the Audit Committee. I think what would be really helpful with this report is if you could give us an indication of what assurances you're actually providing us. So, for example, are you providing assurance that the risk register is up to date, that risks are regularly reviewed, that mitigating actions are in progress, etc., etc. So it would be useful if you gave us more of a summary about the assurances you're giving the committee and maybe highlighting any areas of concern that you have that you might want to draw our attention to, rather than giving us all the register for us to sit and think about whether or not we've got assurance, if that makes sense. That would be more helpful. And then your recommendation to us can be much more focused on accepting the assurance that you're giving us rather than just noting the report, because I think that would then be a bit more meaningful. Also, picking up your point about what we could do with this report, it might be worth looking at the options section in future to actually outline the options to us, so that if we have concerns over particular risks or we're not assured around a particular risk, that perhaps maybe we could forward that through to Cabinet for them to do some more detailed work around. Or if, for example, we may have asked for a briefing on one of the risks because we wanted a bit more information. So that's something that we could work on for the future. On page 6 of your report, there's the mitigating actions.
Can I just interrupt for a second and suggest that maybe we handle the questions you've asked before moving on
okay,
to
sorry,
a
that was just
subsequent one?
comments. Okay.
All very helpful, yeah. So we'll take that away, and for next time we'll make those changes if you suggest. All very helpful, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I've got a question about on page 6, there's the mitigating actions table. It doesn't have any details populated into it. So I wasn't assured if that's a kind of way around that without having to go through line by line myself. So it might be that that's just for somehow managed to got deleted or whatever, but if perhaps maybe that could be circulated, that would be really handy.
Yeah, certainly, and apologies for not seeing in the published version of the report. So I think something's probably happened when it was converted from a Word document to a PDF there, actually. But yeah, sorry for the oversight there. The table does exist in the Word document because I produced it myself. So we'll get that circulated to committee. Thank you.
And then, Chair, just one final point. I do have some comments on the individual risk registers and some questions around some of the overdue actions and areas where they're red. I don't think it would be a good use of our time tonight to go through all of those. So perhaps, Ben, if I email those to you, you could maybe then get, because the answers won't be from yourself, they'll be from other people, and then maybe get that circulated back to the committee. Would that be possible?
No problem at all. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillors, are there any other questions?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, are we going to actually deal with any of the other items, like item 5, 6? Because if not, I can ask one of the questions now.
They will follow on from this. We're not
fine.
skipping them. We were just putting the risk register
fine.
first to provide a bit of context for what follows.
Thank you.
If you could indulge me on one specific question on the risks. We had health and safety on page 13, initially assessed as a 16, currently assessed as an 8. But I note that we've moved the target date for the risk to be mitigated from June this year to December this year. I just wondered if there's a bit of context as to why that shift on such a critical thing was necessary.
Yeah, so the initial risk of 16 is the score that we would give that particular risk if it was completely unmitigated. So if we had no policies in place, we did nothing around health and safety, you know, we're saying that the impact would be catastrophic and the likelihood of that risk materialising would be almost certain. The current risk is scored as an 8 because, as it says within the report, there's been good progress made. The reason for the change in the target date is because there are a few mitigating actions that are still required to be done before we feel comfortable enough scoring this overall risk as a 4, which would be the lowest that we're likely to get that particular risk to. So that's just been around the resource to be able to support with the implementation of the health and safety action plan that was raised from the internal audit, from the audit that informed that particular risk.
Thank you. It's good to hear the progress. Angela, do you want to come in now?
Just to reflect, Chair, that this was the health and safety report that was brought to Cabinet last week. And you'll recall from that report that there were items outstanding and items that had turned from red to amber and amber to green, but there were still items that were amber, and that reflects the state of progress in terms of this mitigations around this risk.
Thank you very much. Members, if there are no more questions, can I move the recommendation at paragraph 3.1 of the report? Can I have a seconder? Councillor Breeding, thank you. And is that agreed, members?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. So we now move to agenda item 5, which is the internal audit recommendations and agreed management actions with the implementation update. Mr. Barnes, could you please introduce that report?
Thank you, Chair. So this is the regular report we bring to the committee now in respect of implementation of the agreed internal audit recommendations. These are captured on our IdeaGen system, which is improving the tracking of progress of those. And officers are reminded as milestones approach, and this does help to keep implementation of the recommendations at the forefront of people's minds. So this report is the current position, or as it was earlier this month, in respect of the progress with recommendations. And we've just added a bit of context around a few where at paragraphs 4.6 onwards, in respect of there's some context to share with you in respect of how those recommendations are progressing, or reasons for slight delays in respect of what we're trying to achieve with them. And this also at 4.10 onwards, some of the previous audits that you'd have seen recommendations in respect of in previous reports, these have now been repurposed to inform reviews that are being done by assistant directors to update the arrangements in respect of those particular areas of activity. So Appendix 1 sets out the status of those that remain on the sort of live on the system. So I'd be happy to try to answer any questions members may have in respect of that.
Councillor Dearson.
Actually, firstly, I've got a comment which is to say that the number of items yet to be started, I think there's been a massive improvement on that. I don't know if you would agree, but where we were, certainly, if not the last meeting, the meeting before, there were a lot more. So I thank the officers for the work they've done in getting those underway. The only two I think that concern me are the general ledger, where there's 9 not yet started, and there's only 9 items that have been raised as audit issues. Treasury management the same, although I see that the due date is not until next year. General ledger concerns me more because it impacts our financial reporting, and the date is 31st December. So I wondered if you just give the committee an update on where we are and what the constraints are, etc.
So those reports are both relatively recent reports as well, so there hasn't been a huge amount of time elapsed since the reporting before we produce this report. As you said, the dates to implement aren't yet due, so that's part of the reason for the fact they haven't been started. I think in discussion with Lance, there was some progress being made, but there wasn't enough to really sort of say it was properly in train, so that it was going to be partially implemented. I think most of those recommendations are ones, but they won't be done till they're done, sort of thing. So there is work to be done, and that's acknowledged, but that will happen. And I think given the focus on this now, there'll be increased pressure to make sure that does happen in terms of the deadlines that were agreed when the reports were agreed.
But there's nothing in there we're concerned about in terms of risk in the time.
I don't think there's any sort of showstoppers. There's not showstoppers in respect of things that are really critical to make sure we get right. They're all improvements that we think and management agree are worth making, but there's nothing that kind of causes me major concern.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Bredding.
Thank you. Do we know what the rationale was behind the decision to deal with the emergency planning rather than the business continuity that we've deferred again?
Yes, the reason for that was that emergency planning, the risks around that are probably more significant in respect to the potential impact on the borough and the council and the population as well. That's about responding to big sort of events and big incidents that occur, whereas business continuity is more focused on the council being able to continue operations in the event of a cyber incident or something that goes wrong in terms of the organisation. So with the capacity of the new officer, I would agree, I'd support the decision to prioritise the emergency planning issues prior to dealing with the business continuity issues. And to be fair, I'd also say that sort of in respect of the response to COVID and the things that the council's done, the change of working arrangements, that has all happened. Business did continue. So whilst we can strengthen the business continuity arrangements, I don't think there are major concerns in respect of the organisation being able to do what it needs to do in the event of having to change the way it operates. But well, as always, that can be strengthened as well.
I'll just ask our CEO to come in on that as well.
Thank you. Just to kind of explain that a little bit further, emergency planning is a statutory requirement we're a Category 1 responder under the Civil Contingencies Act. The requirements on us are very clear and very specific in order for us to be able to meet those statutory responsibilities. The organisation was hugely deficient in the way its approach to emergency planning had been arranged. So we've had to rebuild it from the ground up. And it was essentially my call that that would be the priority. And given the deficiencies in our emergency planning arrangements up until that point.
Ms Mills, question.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Andrew, for the report and for the extra detail in the body of the report that tells us about what's happening with some of those bigger areas and their progress. Because you had highlighted some of those areas, it then drew out where there were overdue audit recommendations on other areas there hadn't been a comment. That then flagged for me, and I appreciate that this report format is work in progress. So really, rather than ask for all the other overdue recommendations, what's happening with those, I wonder if in future reports we could maybe have a list of all the overdue recommendations with an update from service management as to where they are on those. I appreciate that might be a bit of a task for you to have to rally that round to managers, but if they update the iGen system, hopefully you'll just be able to pull off a report on that, and then that gives us a level of assurance around all overdue recommendations that there is progress being made, and then we can then hold the relevant managers to account if we feel that their response is lacking. Thank you.
Mr Barnes.
Yeah, thank you. As you say, this is quite an evolving report format, so sort of all advice and sensible suggestions are welcome, other than those that require huge amounts of work to do, but if it's useful to the committee, then obviously we'll try to facilitate that. But yeah, I'm still looking to develop this further, absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Dearson, you have another question?
Yeah, thank you. No, Paula, that's a great suggestion. If my memory serves me right, at one of our previous meetings, didn't we suggest that if officers had outstanding items that may be worth coming to this meeting to give a personal update on why they were missing their targets and where they were?
Through the chair.
Sorry, Chair.
No, that's fine. I think we did discuss that, and at that time, the report that we had, if I remember correctly, there was quite a lot of historical audits in there, with a lot of historical audit recommendations in there. So I think the team have undertaken a kind of a big review and have slimmed that down to now us looking at like the key things. So I think as it stands at the moment, I'm not too concerned of wanting to see the whites of the eyes of the relevant managers yet. But I think if the improvements that, you know, the suggestion of picking up the outstanding, a list of the outstanding things comes to us, then we can see what managers are actually telling us. And if we feel that that doesn't really answer the question, then maybe that's a question for us to then ask if managers can come to support that. But I'll refer back to.
Sorry, Chair. Thank you.
I think we've kind of self-answered on that one, that we need a watching brief on it, but it does sound like having the list of outstanding actions would be useful. Have you anything to add on that?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think what would be useful, I think, is an escalation process. So I think the suggestion of getting a response and an explanation, and then if you're not satisfied with that, then at that point is when you'd want to potentially say, okay, we're not happy with what's happening here. Please come and explain to us what's going on. But I think you need to go through a due process to get to that point, in my opinion.
Thank you. Members, are there further questions? Okay, thank you. So, members, is the report received?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 6, which is the monitoring report for the government arrangements, which are presented in the annual government statement. So, Mr. Brooke, if you could take us through that.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, this report is to provide an update on the governance arrangements as presented in our annual governance statement for the 24-25 financial year, which would have been brought to this committee in July. The report itself, the update report, is arranged into sections which cover each of our key governance processes that form the basis of our governance framework and indeed the structure of the annual governance statement. The report also contains the action plan, which is included in the annual governance statement, and the progress against those actions. Just a reminder that this report comes to the committee twice a year, so this is the first update report since the annual governance statement in July. It will come to the committee again in the springtime, before we then start to produce the annual governance statement for the 25-26 financial year, which will be brought before committee in July 2026. So again, you have the report in front of you. Happy to take any questions on any of the sections in there. Thank you.
Councillor Redding, I believe you've got a question.
Yes, having gone through the report, on page 2, under the consultation and engagement section, paragraph 5.4, we talk about the tenant engagement framework being rolled out. Has it been rolled out? And if not, when's it anticipated to be implemented?
Mr. Brooke.
The work that this is being overseen by the Housing Improvement Programme Board, and is involved in working with our advisors TPAS to provide that particular framework. I can't tell you off the top of my head whether it is, but there's a programme board tomorrow, so I will tell you after that, and I will bring it back to the committee.
Thank you. Ms. Mills.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Carry on.
Under paragraph 5.7, the business planning and strategy, can we have an update on when the issues will be finalised? Because you've got there remain some issues with timely policy and strategy updates which are being addressed over 25-26. Can we have an update, please?
Yes, so we're using the same system as we use for the corporate risk register and for various other reporting to contain our policies and strategies, effectively register of those. There are about 152 policies that I think we currently have in that register. They will be at various stages of update. Some will be brand new and recently written and adopted. There will be some others which are overdue and require that update. I think considering the number of policies and strategies that we have in place, I think we're working towards having all of those updated by the end of the financial year, but this isn't a quick sort of win really. You know, each policy needs to be obviously reviewed, updated. If it's a new policy, it needs to go through its own governance process as well really. So we have monitoring of those. It was something that we discussed at one of our leadership team meetings this morning actually, in terms of the need to continue the pace on that. I think in areas such as housing, for example, there has been significant progress in terms of them updating their policy framework there. And in other areas like HR, for example, environmental health and licensing, they've been bringing policies before committees for adoption over the years so far. So this isn't all done by the end of this calendar year. I think it's something that's likely to continue over the whole of the financial year. So the issues are that there are some policies and strategies which are overdue, but they are being looked at and they are being worked on.
If I can just jump in on the end of that, and I think Angela, you want to come in as here. We've noticed in the past and had discussions about the fact that there are some overlapping aspects. I'd be interested to know what we're doing to sort of consolidate and slim these down so that we don't have elements of duplication and occasionally conflict between the policies.
Through you, Chair, I think it's worth stating that the fact that we have so many policies is a result of the historic situation that we've inherited. Some of those policies are very, very old indeed. Some of them have been entirely superseded. There is a lot of work that is needed to effectively overhaul the entire policy framework, and that's both a blessing and a curse insofar as the amount of work that's required to do is quite significant. And of course, you don't just write a policy, you have to ensure that it is legislatively compliant, and of course that it reflects the systems and processes that you are using to deliver the service and the training that your staff have in relation to any standard operating procedures that are referred to in the policy. So that process is being undertaken as part of the service review process that every line of service has been going through over the last year. Those policies which need to be updated have been reflected in those service plans and identified, and resource put towards them in order to ensure that they are done. The sort of weeding out process that you refer to is being done kind of on a rolling basis as a consequence of that by a new template which will create a look and feel across the entire suite of policy documentation, and making sure then that cross-references are properly reflected. So one example where that there is sort of room for confusion, for example, in relation to second homes. There is a second home policy for council tax, but there's also a second home policy for environmental health, and then it's also referred to separately in the context of housing. So the making sure that we use consistent language, that we can use consistent terminology, and the definitions are clear. And where there are cross-references and interdependencies, these are pulled out, is part of the work that we're doing. And by putting it through the Idea Gen system, it gives us a complete audit record of what we've done, and also puts forward the kind of the review date. So those are again automatically then scheduled for review in the normal way. If we were at a steady state as a council, we would be reviewing probably maybe 20% of our policies on a rolling annual basis. But we are doing all of them all together all at once, because that's factually where we are in terms of our improvement journey.
Thank you for the clarity on that. Ms Mills.
If I may, Chair, just to ask a follow-up question on that. Given that you are reviewing everything in a year, obviously then if they all have relatively same review periods, you're going to be in the same situation in either a couple of years' time. So will you stagger the frequency of those reviews? So some might be every 2 years, some might be 3 years, some might be 5, so that you're not in the same position with such a workload once every 3 years.
Absolutely. I mean, so for some policies are just reviewed, for example, as there's legislative change. Others will be steady state and get reviewed on a rolling basis, as you described, sort of staggered accordingly. That's linked to the amount of risk that sits within a policy, its prioritisation in terms of service delivery, and also, as I've said, any kind of propensity for legal or other change. We're also mindful, of course, with LGR coming up on the horizon, that we don't want to create a cliff edge for a successor authority, and again to try and make sure that into the future that the ability to review policies and making sure that policies, as you say, Chair, that where there are interdependencies are reviewed on a concurrent cycle is also captured, and the Idea Gen system allows us to do that.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions, Ms Mills?
Thank you. Okay. I'll concentrate on my own questions now. Ben, thank you again for the report. Again, gives us a really good understanding of the arrangements and assurances and the processes that are in place. There's quite a lot of detail in your report, in the narrative that you're giving, which is good. But I had picked out throughout some of that, and I think using the policy comment as an example, those things aren't actually in the action plan. So the issue about policies and the large amount of work that you've got to do isn't in the action plan. And I think it might be worth going through your report and just cross-referencing that back to the action plan, because I think you might have picked up new things that you need to be doing in this 6 months that might now need to be reflected in the action plan. And I know we issue the action plan at the beginning of the year and monitor progress against that. But as new governance issues come up, they ought to be added to the action plan. So it should be a live document that's not just at one point in time. So that would be a suggestion. And then I've got two questions, if you will indulge me, Chair. The first is, as a result of the assurances that you've provided within this report, would you change any of the assurance ratings that you originally gave under the AGS? And then secondly, as a result of your review, are there any new or emerging governance concerns that require a specific action to be added to the plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, in terms of if we were to do the assessments again, and I haven't done this, so I'm not going to sort of commit and go through each one and say, well, I now think this is, from a partial to whatever. But I think there has been progress against all of our governance areas that we look at within the annual governance statement. As things currently stand, I don't think there's any significant issues that have arisen so far this year that would result in us needing to provide maybe a downgrade of one of the assessments, which I know we've had previously when we've looked at things like, for example, information governance. I think that was one area that had dropped quite significantly following a substantial audit that took place. Health and safety, I think, was another one of those areas. So let me have a think about how we might present that. I suppose, I'm conscious what I don't want to do is almost do a kind of like an annual governance statement kind of score, because obviously we meet as a team and there's a number of people who would contribute to that. But I think maybe something in the background, and maybe just to reflect that in the narrative, would just be something along the lines of, well, actually, we think we are making good progress here that potentially could change the rating at the time that we do the annual governance statement for 25-26.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that would be really helpful, because it gives us assurance that the journey that we're on, and when you're showing improvement. So again, we can then note that as accepting that assurance that and note the improvement that's being made. So yeah, that'd be useful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Can I just add to what you've suggested? Can we just clearly flag if at any point something's inserted into the work plan that it's new and when it's been inserted? I don't know if that will happen, but it would just be useful for context when we're reviewing it next.
Yes, certainly happy to do that. I think the idea of adding to the action plan is a good one, and we can just make that clear by having a clear subsection within the action plan of new actions that have been added during the year. Thank you.
Councillor Bredding.
Just have one last question, please. Under page 3, 5.9, you talk about the service plans that have been completed. Are there any service plans still to be undertaken? Service reviews, I do apologise. You said 9 service reviews have been completed. There were 3 still outstanding, still to be done. Are there any other service reviews that need to be undertaken?
So I think as things currently stand, I think all service reviews have now been completed. I think those 3 that were outstanding will be in implementation stage. So I know that within the housing service, they are very much at implementation stage. I believe so within the waste and recycling as well. And I can't remember the last one off the top of my head, but I mean, they have all progressed. There aren't any that haven't started or haven't been written now. I think they've all been written, implemented and approved, but they're now just at implementation stages for those last 3.
Thank you for that. Members, are there any additional questions on this report? No. Thank you very much. In that case, members, is the report received? It is. Thank you very much. This brings us to agenda item 7, which is our Treasury management update for the second quarter. Ms. Cox, if you could take us through the report.
Thank you, Chair.
So this report is the Q2 Treasury Management Strategy. It goes through the movement that we've seen in Q2 to the position as at the 30th of September. What it shows is that we've taken out £1 million of borrowing in this quarter, and that was for the depot that was purchased in April. We've also seen repayment maturity of 2 investments that we had that were at a high fixed investment rate. So that has brought down our overall interest investment return. However, we're still above our benchmark of the bank's overnight rate. So that's still quite positive news. We give assurance that we are in line with our strategy that was agreed in February. And overall, it's reflecting a good position. Our interest is as reported in Q1, where we've increased the forecast in light of a greater interest return. And there is no change to that position. We're still sort of on forecast and budget. If there's any queries, I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions? Councillor Dearson, sorry.
Hi. Well, firstly, I want to congratulate you on the fact that our investments burned 698, so that's an increase of 235,000. So I think that's great progress. I just had some questions, and these are not meant to be trying to catch anyone out, but they're just really knowledge share. So there was a question raised at the last meeting: which authorities do we have investments with, and the due diligence carried out? I know we've got investments with Badberg and Flintshire and Dover. And the comment that we got given the last couple of days said local authorities are considered low risk as they are not able to go bankrupt and therefore unlikely to default. I was just trying to understand that comment that's been given to us, bearing in mind that since 2021 several authorities have gone bust, issuing Section 114, including Birmingham and, of course, Thurrock. So I'm just wondering, when we say local authorities cannot go bankrupt or likely to default, what metrics are we using to make that assumption?
So when we issue a Section 114 notice, that doesn't mean that we've gone bankrupt. It just means that we have financial issues and we need help to therefore sort of resolve that situation. So central government may step in or other bodies to try and help with that. So whereas in the private sector, a company can just go bankrupt, fold, and therefore not go through any process, in this instance, someone would come in and we'd have to be looking to sell off our assets and trying to sort of recoup that way. And local government would be high on that list to be repaid.
All right, okay, thank you. I appreciate the investing when another council may offer benefits like shared risk and joint venture. So just wondering if we could get an insight for knowledge share on the 3 councils that we've invested funds with. Is it purely rates or are these joint ventures? And if joint ventures, what are they?
I don't know the details behind those 3. Usually what happens is we get information around from our Treasury advisors around some local authorities that are looking for investments from other local authorities. And at that point, we'd look at the money that we have available, whether we've got some available or not, and invest that with them in terms of whether it's joint ventures. So for us, it's just an investment, but I can find out some more detail to see if there's anything more on that for you.
Maybe if we could just have that for the next meeting. And I presume the 12 million in Appendix 2 is the 12 million with those 3 councils?
Yes, it will be.
You can just bring our CEO in on it.
Thank you. Councillor Disson, I'm not aware that the council is in any joint venture project with any other council. If it were, then that would be something that Cabinet would be cited on, and I would certainly know about it.
Right, okay. So is there a better benefit then in investing with district councils than investing with money market?
So firstly, apologies, I probably totally misunderstood what you were referring to in that point with the joint ventures. But yes, it will be about interest rates and the rates that are being offered to us compared to money market funds, compared to any other investment vehicles that are out there.
Ms Mills.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say thank you for the reports. Very good detailed summary of the activity for the first half of the year. I think it does show a positive assurance, and it's good to see that income generation has remained at that higher level, budgeted level. So well done on a good report, and please pass our thanks to the staff for all their hard work. So thank you.
Agree with that wholeheartedly. Councillors, are there any other questions? None. Okay. Members, in that case, I move the recommendations set out at paragraph 3.1 of the report. Can I have a seconder for that, please?
Indeed.
Councillor Dearson, thank you. Members, is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. That brings us to agenda item 8, the Counter Fraud Investigation Annual Report for 24-25. Members, this is now our last. This is an item that was deferred from the last meeting. Mr. Kleinberg, would you please introduce the report for us?
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'm presenting the Counter Fraud Annual Report for 24-25. So bear with me, it's the first time I've compiled this and reported on it. I think I draw your attention first of all about what the report needs to reflect onto yourselves, which covers off main key areas that feed into the counter fraud strategy for the council, which is its proactive work, its work with regards to dealing with the National Fraud Initiative and the figures that the council feeds into that dictates where the focus of the team is. For the performance of the team over this 24-25 period, if I could bring your attention to item sorry, I've got a lag. Do beg your pardon. Item 4.4, which just gives the overall annual performance data for the team. So we had 11 intelligence reports that were sent in to the service from other law enforcement agencies that we then process and forward on to see whether there's something to act on here within the council or whether it's something that other agencies need to deal with. There were 38 reports made in total that came into the department. If you look at the visual below, it shows where those reports are. Something was, I believe, was brought up historically from members was the need to avoid acronyms and abbreviations, etc. So, as I've read through this report, there's a couple in here that we'll work through on the next report to ensure they're not there again. But it shows there that we have reports from regards to the right to buy applications. There was an increase there because the government made a change with regards to the applied discount for a right to buy application for social housing stock. That's why there was an increase, but we dealt with them effectively, as well as revenues and benefits, worker related, which is more of the internal corporate type fraud concerns, cybercrime, the instances we've seen there. We are, if you like, at a front end of that, is that sometimes we get those reports that come through. It may not be us that actually deals with them when you consider that the people that put in the cyber attacks may not even be in the UK. It's an information gathering exercise to use data then to whatever they want to deal with that fraud with. So we work in conjunction with the Action Fraud Service. So that there's instances there, as well as the grants and money laundering concerns. So that was the main area of those 38 reports that came through. There are 5 current active investigations at the end of the year that we're still working on. And the housing initiatives that we worked on with the housing team, the front-facing housing team, resulting in the recovery of 1 social housing property that was illicitly being used in accordance with the Prevention of Social Housing Fraud Act. So that gave a cost avoidance value of £43,000. What will be reflected in our oncoming is that the 2 years ago, the Central Government Cabinet Office released a body to, which was the department, sorry, I do beg your pardon, it's not the department, it was the PSFA, which is the Public Sector Fraud Authority, which has been put into place to have a bit more of a structured overview of the fraud risk and how it affects local authorities. And one of the key areas they're looking on is what is that cost avoidance area? How can we provide these a more informed decision on what these figures actually look like. So the reason I bring that up at this point, where it's reflected at the moment as the national average of £43,000 is the misuse of a social housing unit, because obviously social housing availability is getting less and lesser. The cost is increased in that area for what makes up that figure, and that figure now looks closer in the space of 1 year to around 64,000, is the average cost. So what we're going to do is in our next reports is we'll give more information that will give a more informed explanation of that. So that's the annual performance data. I don't know if there's any questions on that before I move forward on the response to our strategy.
Can we proceed with the strategy and then see if
Absolutely,
we've got some
no
questions?
problem at all. So a lot of the activity that the counter fraud team were doing through the course of this year. So we had oversight of the National Fraud Initiative, where the data from the council was provided to the Cabinet Office. It's a national initiative that most, if not all, local authorities contribute to. And what that provides is a RAG rating of the points direction to potential fraud risk areas. So we have oversight, and we've been working with the frontline data owners of the council on putting that together. That informs really the proactive work of what we could do with those teams, front-facing teams. We've also done, there was 3 joint working activities with the housing teams and the local neighbourhood policing team, which was social housing tenancy audits, inspections, which were fraud-led, i.e. we went into these initiatives with intelligence-led concerns that were highlighted from this National Fraud Initiative, as well as other leading factors such as higher rates of antisocial behaviour or concerns that properties were being misused. That made up of the cases that are being carried over into the new year came from one of those initiatives. What we also did was stepped up our physical presence within the council as well to try and encourage as much interaction with the frontline services. So we are a minimum now of once every 2 weeks we have a physical presence, a day of action, where we also deliver training, fraud awareness training to frontline services within the council. We have done that with the licensing team, environmental enforcement, as well as the upkeep increase with the housing management team who have had recent appointments, so that's been quite good. In addition to that, we've completed now the online e-learning package that's going to be available to all staff, which raises what local authority fraud looks like and how council employees can respond to it directly into the team. So that e-learning package we hopefully to make live. We've been working with the L&D lead here at the council to push that out in the coming months, or certainly by before the end of the next financial year. So that's been that links in with the reactive strategy we did for the year. Is there any questions on that? That's the completion of the report.
Members, any questions? Ms Mills.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start off with an apology because I've got quite a lot to say on this report, so I will break at a certain point to allow other members to come in if they want. Firstly, I really want to raise my concerns that we are halfway through 25-26 and we're only now receiving the annual report for 24-25. I believe that this type of report ought to come to us in June and July with all the other annual reports, so that can then feed into the annual governance statement and other bits and pieces. Secondly, I would have expected to have received an update on the progress of 25-26, as we're now halfway through that year and we haven't had any information on that. So that was just 2 comments that I would like noting. In terms of the actual report, so the report focuses on 24-25. Can I clarify then, for 24-25, you had only 38 allegations, of which 5 are still active, and therefore you've closed 33, and we've only got 43,000 notional savings attributed, which actually relates to one particular case. It just seems to me that the figures are quite low for an organisation, for a local authority. I know Castle Point is a relatively compact authority. I won't say small, because it has numerous residents and provides the same level of service that any other local authority provides. But I do feel that the figures, I would expect a counter fraud team to be washing its face. Washing its face, and I don't think £43,000 for a year is doesn't seem right to me. Doesn't feel enough. In your report to the committee back in March 25, you reported you had 5 cases under investigation. Are these the same 5 cases that are still ongoing, or are they different ones? And if so, what's happening with those? And how do these figures report? Again, it's a performance report, so I would expect to see some comparison to previous years. So how does this compare to 23-24? Because I haven't got that feeling. So that was my comments around sort of the amount and information in there. On the strategy itself, again, I wasn't the independent member in March, but I pulled up the report that was in March, and the strategy actually hasn't changed. The commentary and the strategy hasn't changed since March 25. So when you read it, there's still things that are still to be done, and back in March, we were near completion of rolling out the e-learning, and we're now November, and it hasn't been rolled out yet. To me, that just seems a completely huge long length of time for something to actually take traction. So I'm not assured by this report, is what I'm saying. Because I don't think it provides sufficient information, and it's far too late in the year for that to be assurance related, because it relates to the previous year, and thus all the annual reporting has been done on that. One of the things that I would like to see is, or understand, is when the fraud risk register was last presented to the committee for us to consider. When we last reported on compliance with the SITFA Code of Practice on managing the risk of fraud and corruption, and also strategies such as fighting fraud and corruption locally. So when was an update given to the committee in relation to how the service addresses that for Castle Point? And if you do have it, I would be interested to know what the figures are for 1st of April to date in relation to the frauds that are, or the instances that you've had, and the amount that has been recovered. So that's kind of like a bit of a long statement there, but there's a few questions in there. I'm particularly interested in knowing what's happened with those 5 investigations that were open at the end of the year. Have they been closed off as well? Thank you.
So quite a few points there. Are you comfortable to take them through one by one?
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, take on everything you've said. Completely understand the line of question as well. Just to address the first one, if I may, with regards to the 5 number, because it is a perception that maybe it's the same 5, it's not the same 5. But this then takes into account your other point you made with regards to this report needs to reflect that. This is not an excuse for the report, but this is my first time compiling this report and it being handed over. So what preceded it? There was only certain information I had to hand. One of the things that I am trying to do, and we're doing successfully with regards to the Section 151 officer, is that we're working on these areas to ensure that we embed and we dovetail, if you like, into these frontline services, that we have got this provision in place. That work is reflected in the strategy. that does need updating to so it reflects in this report, so it shows what those actions actually are, what we have been doing. And this report, I totally agree with, it doesn't do that. There is work that's happened, but it's not reflected in this report. So we'll ensure that the next one that's addressed. But we are working on that at the moment with the Section 151 officer. So the activities that have been going on, when I've mentioned things like the National Fraud Initiative data, the training to the frontline staff, this is side-by-side training as well as reacting effectively to reports that come in that are fresh, is that's all consistent and that is working really well. I don't think this report is reflecting that. So that is taken into account. I know the points you have raised here, you will see that in the next one. The delay, I can only apologise for that, but this is there's been a change of personnel, shall we say, and certain handover of tasks could have been done a lot more effectively. But all the points you've raised, we'll address, and hopefully I know you will see that in the next report we give you, the quarterly report. One of the things that I think was presented is on record is that it's down here as being quarterly reports. I had to need to get it verified, but it was a suggestion that was made, I think, that was accepted, was that it wasn't going to be quarterly, it might be half yearly. So I'll bring that up again and just make sure that's the case. I'll be more than happy to go with whatever the need is here. But I think Mike Deneen presented, my predecessor was, on what the reports data set time sets would be.
I think we'll check back on the minutes for that and let you know.
Thank you. But that's one of the things I looked at because I wanted to ensure there was more of a continuity.
I think my recollection is that we asked for quarterly reports rather than half yearly. So, but we'll go back on the minutes.
Yeah, and again, this is the work we're currently doing with the Section 151 to ensure that the service gives what the council needs, and we move into that. One of the transitioning elements as well is that although we've had more of a physical presence, with more of an engagement with the operational front ends, I don't think that's detailed in this report, and we could do that a lot more as well. But you will see that in the future reports, as well as the training. And then there was another area of reports, line of query as well.
If it helps, it was about the fraud risks, the fraud risk register, and also showing progress against the Code of Practice on managing the risk of fraud and the fighting fraud and corruption locally. Yeah.
Again, these have been discussion points, so you will see them coming up in future reports, and we could report on them effectively. And we'll also be able to give you a what was before to what we're doing now, and it could hopefully alleviate some of those concerns you've got as well.
And sorry, through the chair, the figures for the first half of this year, because we're now 6+ months in. So, what how many investigations have we had, and what value?
Yeah, and I think that's the positive that I can give you for the next report. So I'll ensure that is brought to the fore, and you are getting it. But from a time perspective, when investigation starts to when they completed, so there are investigations from last year that have resulted in properties being recovered, but because they weren't within this 24-25 period, we couldn't report on them. They were in the pipeline, if you want, for being. We could have said, well, there's at that point another 3 that were coming back, which would reflect on 43,000 times 3, but it was just shy of that, so we didn't want to report on that, which will make us look great for the next quarterly report, though. That's the only assurance I could give you, but we'll collate that and we'll submit it.
I think the point that's being made is that if we're quarterly reporting, we're too short.
No, of course, completely accepted.
Sorry, I wouldn't mind through you. I just wondered, do you have the figures with you today to tell us how many investigations have taken place from the 1st of April to date, and how much has been recovered as a result of that? Or is that something you'll come back to us on?
I will come back to it, only because we do have a dashboard, a performance rating that plugs into our casework management system that shows us almost an active update, but this is a recently new piece of equipment. So for the purposes of this meeting, I'd rather defer it if I can and come back to you on it. Thank you.
Councillor Redding.
Just going back to your previous statement about investigations overlapping over the time period, again, it would be useful then to have some understanding of what those investigations are. Not in detail, obviously, but roughly what's happening and what the anticipated recovery cost would be. And then we wouldn't sort of look at this and thinking, are you worth value for money? Okay, thank you.
I think that was possibly more of a comment than
Question,
but-
yeah, I mean, I completely see what you're saying, and I think this has been brought up previously, but just what I believe will benefit as well potentially of what we've put together as the e-learning staff package, it should be completely made available as well to members, because it helps with that communication out to the residents of the council of what these frauds are, what the bottom line is, what the cost effective, and this is the deterrence and this is the response to it. So absolutely take that on, and it will be reflected in future reporting.
Councillor Dearson.
Yeah, just off the back of Lorraine's point about value for money, but is there a requirement, I'm sorry, through a chair, is there a requirement, I would assume there must be a requirement that we would have to have a fraud risk team?
Sorry, Chair.
Well, I'm certainly not going to answer this, but are we required to have a fraud risk team?
It's not a statutory requirement, but it's a key part of our performance risk and financial assurance framework.
Thank you.
Members, are there any other questions? Okay, I've got one from myself. I'm just trying to get a grip on how you allocate resource, because what if you can tell us which councils you provide this service for, and how, given the relative size of the councils and your caseload, how resource is allocated. Because if you got, say, 30 leads from one council, how do we ensure that we get that your support where needed on our caseload?
Thank you for the question, Chair. Yeah, so you are the only other council that we provide this service for. There was the team historically previously used to provide this service, I think, to housing associations and other councils, but that is no longer the case. We've consolidated at Thurrock, and we are a team that now just provides, obviously, we have the provision we provide at Thurrock, and we have the service that we provide here. So with regards to volume of cases and how much resource we provide, again, with a fraud investigation case, no two cases are the same. So one may require a financial investigator to go and seek money under the correct legislative processes for that from banks, etc., on an individual. One may not. One may require multiple visits to a property and or to obtain statements from many individuals. One may not. So when it comes to delivering how much resources required, is done on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the fraud is and the severity or scale of the fraud. So it's difficult to answer that, but we can only look back and look on what historic cases have been and give an example of how much resource was used. Does that answer that question?
Not quite. How do we get assurance that we're not paying for a service that Thurrock's using?
Oh, I see. Sorry, I see what you're saying. That can be based on the activity that's done through the course of the year, really. And that will be down to when we come to when the service reviews are conducted with the Section 151 officer, is whether he thinks he's getting value for money in response to the operational activity we've undertaken for the year.
Ms Mills.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've just read the financial implications section, and it says here that that the service is £68,000 per year, and this is the cost equivalent of one FTE. So that's dedicated. I know it wouldn't be one dedicated FTE resource because it'll be split across your team, but that would indicate that we have one person. We have resource throughout the year. I think it would be really handy to understand how this contract has been pulled together in terms of how that's, one FTE, but that's doing what is that? A proportion of that when the contract was awarded, and this is probably more for Castle Point side of things, is how did we determine how much resource we needed? Was that how much proactive resource, etc., etc.? Because it just doesn't. To me at the moment, it seems quite a lot of money for very little that we're getting back. In terms of qualitative outcomes, in terms of money back into the authority, whether that's notional or not. All the added value stuff around training, etc., that's great, but it's about, the preventative side of things in terms of how do we get the message out to residents that fraud is not acceptable, but not just residents, but internal as well. And these are the cases, that kind of thing. I'm kind of waffling a bit, but I think I'd like to understand a little bit more about how this contract is structured and how it is contract managed around getting more assurance around the contract management process as well, if that would be possible. Thank you.
I think that's an us question, not a question for you, Mr. Kleinberg. So perhaps we can ask our 151 officer to bring us some a report to the next meeting, if that's acceptable.
So yeah, through you, Chair, the questions are appropriate for the 151, who is the commissioning officer in respect of this service. It is a historic arrangement, and notwithstanding that the relatively low numbers reflected in cash terms in the report that you have before you, the amount of effort expended quite clearly exceeds the kind of cashable benefit. In terms of the kind of the right sizingness of the commission and the ongoing kind of fit for an organisation, again, I think that's something that the 151 officer can speak to. And if you're content, members, I can ask him to produce a report to come to the next meeting, giving a little bit more background. And then that will also allow the 151 officer and Mr. Kleinberg to liaise in relation to provision of the additional information you've asked for, and to kind of synchronise producing that sort of information if that's assisting.
Ms Mills?
Through you, Chair, thank you. That would be really handy, and I suppose as well, if we were then able to get it'll be quarter 3 report, at the same time as that, then we can then take the two together. That would be really handy. That would be really good, and we'd get good assurance. So thank you.
Yes, I can. Well, let me just double check the chronology to make sure that it fits within the timelines. But I agree that bringing all of that information together as a sort of package of information will give the committee the most rounded view of the questions that you've been answering this evening.
Thank you for the answers there and the action that we're going to take. Members, are there any other questions on this report? Thank you. In that case, members, is the report received? Okay, thank you very much. Members, the final item for the agenda today is item 10, our work plan. That has been circulated. Is that noted? We have a question, Ms Mills.
Sorry, after this one, it's the last question I'll be asking, don't worry. I was just wondering, and I have to admit, I have got myself a bit confused in terms of the timings of this, but should we not have had the external auditor's value for money annual report? Because they're supposed to report to the authority by the end of November. So I would have expected to have received that at this meeting. Is that something that's coming? Thank you.
Angela, if you can take that one.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the Councillor Nick Harvey, myself and Mr Bonds met with EY on Monday to discuss that. A draft value for money report has been provided to us for kind of early feedback. That report will reference the Council's well-publicised regulatory judgment from the Regulator of Social Housing and the contravention notice from the Building Safety Regulator, because those two inspections took place during that financial year. And clearly, although significant progress has been made on both of those issues, that reporting will just also reflect that also. So that has been shared with me, and it came yesterday. The reporting will also reflect the outcome of an identified potential fraud activity relating to a former employee of a former contractor. So all of those things will be picked up in that value for money report. But the reporting itself has been delayed as a result of an accounting issue which I made EY aware of relating to the balance sheet in the 24-25 accounts. And the issue is being investigated by myself, and EY are undertaking further more detailed audit work to satisfy themselves and, of course, ultimately this committee as to the details of the matter. And this has meant that the report, which was due to come to committee in January, will now not be available probably till the end of February. And I'll continue to work closely with EY and with the chair to make sure that we are getting that report moved as quickly as possible. They have produced, they have put on additional resources onto the team, and we of course have made the financial resources available for them to do that. So when they tell me it's slipped by about a month, I think that's probably about right.
Thank you for that update. Councillor Bredding.
Sorry, I'm going by memory here now, because obviously it's the first we've heard about this delay. Does that mean we're not going to hit we're supposed to have an end of February an end of February report going out on the financial balance from EY. Does that mean we're not going to hit that deadline?
Through you, Chair. So the EY are aware of the reporting guidelines, but there will be delay. And I'm waiting to hear from them further in terms of actual timelines. But it will be slightly delayed. And because it's an ongoing issue, I can't really say anything more about that at the moment. But just again to assure you that we'll continue to stay in touch with EY and keep the chair updated.
Thank you. Disappointing to hear that. Members, any other questions on the work plan? Okay. In that case, that being our final item, members, do we note the work plan? Thank you. Members, that concludes our business for this evening. The meeting is closed at 20:38. Thank you all for attending.